The eviction notice arrived by certified mail on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I'd just finished a double shift at Rosie's diner, my uniform still smelling of coffee and bacon grease, when I spotted the official envelope waiting on my kitchen counter. My roommate Jenna must have signed for it hours earlier. As I tore open the envelope, I already knew what it contained. The property management company had warned all tenants in our building last month. The 1920s apartment complex in downtown Portland had been sold to developers, but seeing it in black and white, notice to vacate 60 days, still felt like a punch to the gut. I sank onto the worn-out sofa, still in my waitress uniform, and stared at the document. 6 years in this apartment, 6 years of saving tips, working doubles, building something that nobody, especially not my parents, knew anything about. And now I had 2 months to find somewhere new. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Dad and I are coming to Portland next weekend. Dinner Sunday? We need to talk about your future." Perfect timing. Another lecture about wasting my business. Degree as just a waitress was exactly what I needed right now. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from today. And if this story resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I'm sharing the exact blueprint I used to build my real estate portfolio while everyone thought I was just serving pancakes. I'm Megan Andrews, and this is how I discovered that my parents' lifelong disappointment in my career choice wasn't just emotional. It was about to become a full-blown family crisis. But they never expected that their criticism would push me to finally reveal everything I'd been building silently for years. A truth that would shatter our family's carefully constructed expectations forever. 6 years ago, I'd graduated with a business degree from State University. My parents, Richard and Diana Andrews, had expected me to follow my father into investment, banking, or at least take the corporate job offers that had come my way. Instead, I'd moved to Portland, Oregon, supposedly for a gap year that had stretched into 6. "Waiting tables is beneath your potential," my father had said during our last phone call. "Your education is going to waste." What they didn't know was that Rosie's diner wasn't just my job, it was my market research lab. The diner sat at the intersection of Portland's rapidly gentrifying East Side neighborhoods. For 6 years, I'd been listening to conversations about property values, development plans, and neighborhood changes while refilling coffee cups. I'd been tracking which blocks were transforming next while delivering plates of eggs and hash browns. And I'd been using my tips, every single dollar, to slowly build something of my own. "Megan, the Reynolds party needs more coffee." Tanya, the diner's manager, called across the restaurant, snapping me back to the present moment. I tucked the eviction notice into my apron pocket and grabbed the coffee pot. The Reynolds were regulars, a group of contractors who came in every Wednesday morning. As I approached their table, I caught snippets of their conversation. "The Hawthorne corridor is next. Those old warehouses by the river just got approved for conversion." I poured coffee, my hands moving automatically while my mind raced. The warehouses by the river had been on my radar for months. If the zoning had changed? "Is it true, Mike?" I asked as I refilled his cup. "The warehouse district got approved for residential?" Mike Reynolds looked up, surprised but pleased that I was interested. Customers always loved when you remembered their conversations. "Sure did, Meg. City Council approved it last night. Those old buildings will be lofts by next summer." "If you had money to invest, that's where I'd put it." I smiled. "Just curious. Looking forward to seeing the neighborhood improve." "Good thing you caught us today," Mike added. "We're moving our weekly breakfast to the south side starting next week. New project over there." My heart sank a little. The Reynolds crew had been a reliable source of industry gossip for years. "We'll miss you guys," I said sincerely. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of orders and refills, my mind preoccupied with both the eviction notice and my parents' upcoming visit. By the time I punched out at 3 p.m., I'd made a decision. It was time to accelerate my timeline, time to make some calls. My apartment might have been small and outdated, but it had one perfect feature: a walk-in closet that I'd converted into a home office. Behind a false wall of hanging clothes was a desk, a computer, and 6 years of meticulously maintained records. I closed the door behind me and powered up my computer. The spreadsheet that appeared contained my entire financial life. Every tip, every investment, every property acquisition, all carefully hidden from family and friends. Column A. Properties. 9 small multi-unit buildings acquired over 6 years. Column B. Monthly rental income, growing steadily as I renovated units. Column C. Property values, increasing far beyond my initial investments. Column D. The Warehouse District Opportunity Fund, nearly ready to deploy. What had started with a $5,000 inheritance from my grandmother and tips from the diner had grown into something I'd never dared show anyone. Not my roommate, not my childhood, friends, and certainly not my parents, who still believed I was wasting my potential serving pancakes. The last row in my spreadsheet contained the sum of my net worth: $4.3 million in equity and cash, growing monthly with each rent check and property appreciation. My phone rang, displaying my real estate agent's number. "Amber, tell me you have good news," I answered. "The Highland Heights property just accepted your offer," she replied. "But there's more. Remember that mansion on Overlook Boulevard you asked me to monitor? The owners dropped the price this morning, significantly." My heart raced. The Overlook property, a stunning 1930s mansion with views of the city and mountains, had been my dream acquisition for years. Not just as an investment, but as a home. My home. "How significant?" I asked. $2 million even. They're motivated. Sellers. Divorce situation. I glanced at my spreadsheet. With the equity from my properties and the cash reserves I'd built, I could make it work. Barely. "Send me the details," I said. "And Amber, let's move quickly." After hanging up, I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling of my closet office. The timing was almost poetic. Evicted from my apartment just as my dream home became available. And all while my parents prepared to deliver another lecture about my life choices. Maybe it was time to show them exactly what just a waitress had been building all these years. I picked up my phone again and called Jenna. "Remember how I said I might be moving out before the eviction deadline? It's happening, and I need a favor." My father's voice on the phone had that familiar edge, the tone he reserved for discussions about my potential. I balanced the phone against my shoulder as I counted out my tips from the morning shift. $87 in cash, already mentally allocated to my investment fund. "We're just concerned, Megan," he said. "You're 28 years old. This waitressing phase should have ended years ago." "It's not a phase, Dad," I replied for perhaps the 100th time. "I like my job. Your mother and I didn't pay for a business degree from state so you could serve pancakes for the rest of your life." I bit back the response I wanted to give. There was no point arguing. Not over the phone, not when they were visiting in 3 days, not when everything was about to change. "Anyway, we've made dinner reservations at Caraway's for Sunday at 7, he continued. "And we've set up a meeting for you on Monday morning with Jeremy Wilson. Remember him? He's a partner at Blackstone Financial now. They have an opening in their analyst program." I closed my eyes, counting backward from 10. My father had been arranging meetings with his contacts for years, convinced that the right introduction would finally snap me out of my waitressing delusion. "I have a shift on Monday morning," I said flatly. "Megan, this is exactly what we need to discuss. It's time to take your career seriously." "I'll see you Sunday at Caraway's," I replied, carefully neutral. "I need to go now. Love you both." I ended the call before he could respond and stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was tired, her blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, faint shadows under blue eyes. My waitress uniform was nothing special. Black pants, white button-up shirt, comfortable shoes. I'd worn some variation of this outfit for 6 years, through thousands of shifts, while slowly building my real estate empire under everyone's radar. My phone chimed with a text from Amber, my real estate agent. Overlook inspection completed. All systems go. Can meet tomorrow to review financing options. For the first time that day, I smiled. Then my phone buzzed again. This time an email notification from Jenna. The huge favor. I opened it immediately. Meg, it's all arranged. Catering, furniture, everything. But are you sure about this? It seems extreme. Your parents might have heart attacks. Love you, but worried about you. P.S. I still can't believe you kept this secret from me for 6 years, I typed back quickly. Heart attacks unlikely. Financial shock and awe completely intentional. Thanks for handling everything. I'll fill you in tonight. Jenna had been my roommate for 3 years, yet she'd had no idea about my real estate portfolio until yesterday when I'd finally revealed everything and asked for her help with an elaborate plan. Her background in event planning made her the perfect accomplice. The diner was quiet when I returned for my evening shift. Just a few regulars at the counter and a family of tourists by the window. Rosie herself was working the grill tonight. At 65, she still insisted on cooking during at least 1 shift a day, her silver hair tucked under a faded bandana. You're looking thoughtful, she commented as I tied my apron. Everything okay with that apartment situation? Rosie knew about the eviction. Everyone in the building did. But she didn't know about my alternative housing plans. Working on it, I replied, which wasn't a lie. Might have a solution soon. You know you can stay with Frank and me if you need to, she offered, flipping a perfect row of burgers with practiced ease. Spare room's always open. My throat tightened unexpectedly. Rosie and her husband had shown me more genuine support in 6 years than my parents had in my entire life. They'd never once suggested that waitressing was beneath me or questioned my choices. Thank you, I said sincerely. But I think I've got it handled. The dinner rush kept me busy until closing. By the time I'd wiped down my last table and cashed out my tips, another 112, it was nearly midnight. My feet ached as I walked the 6 blocks home, but my mind was already racing ahead to tomorrow's meetings. Jenna was waiting up when I returned, her marketing agency's laptop open on our small dining table. Spreadsheets and design boards were spread across the surface. Okay, walk me through this insanity again, she said by way of greeting. You've secretly been a real estate mogul while serving pancakes for 6 years, and now you're buying a mansion just to shock your judgmental parents? I dropped my bag and sat across from her. I've been planning to buy the Overlook property for years. The timing just happens to be convenient. Jenna raised an eyebrow. And the elaborate Sunday dinner plan? A necessary dramatic flair. I reached for her laptop, turning it to face me. Show me what you've put together. For the next hour, we reviewed Jenna's meticulous plans for Sunday evening. The catering menu, the temporary furniture rentals, the strategic placement of property portfolios and architectural drawings throughout the mansion's main floor. Every detail designed to maximize the impact when my parents realized exactly what their just-a-waitress daughter had built. This is either brilliant or terrible, Jenna concluded, closing her laptop. Either way, I want front-row seats. You'll have them, I promised. Now get some sleep. I need to call my contractors at 6 a.m. After Jenna went to bed, I retreated to my closet office one last time. This small, hidden space had been my sanctuary for years, the only place where I'd allowed myself to fully embrace the business mind my parents had always wanted me to use. I'd purchased my first property with $5,000 from my grandmother and $20,000 in tips saved during my first year at the diner. It was a dilapidated duplex in a neighborhood that developers hadn't yet discovered. I'd lived in one unit and rented the other, using the income to slowly renovate both sides. 6 months later, I'd leveraged the improved property to acquire a small 4-unit building. Then another. Each property carefully selected based on conversations overheard at the diner, relationships built with contractors who became regulars, and a meticulous study of Portland's development patterns. My spreadsheet now tracked 9 properties, 37 rental units, and the warehouse conversion project that was about to break ground. Every acquisition, every renovation, every decision had been calculated and executed while my parents believed I was wasting my potential. The next morning, I met Amber at a coffee shop near the diner before my shift. "You're sure about this?" she asked, sliding the final purchase agreement across the table. "The Overlook property is gorgeous, but it's a big step up from your investment properties." "I'm sure," I replied, signing where indicated. "The numbers work." Amber studied me for a moment. "You know, most of my clients who are acquiring a $2 million home don't show up in Waitress uniforms." I smiled as I handed back the paperwork. "That's part of the appeal." "Speaking of which," she continued, "I've arranged for the keys to be available tomorrow. The sellers have already moved out, so the property is vacant. You mentioned something about hosting a dinner there on Sunday?" "A small family gathering," I confirmed. "Nothing that will damage the property." "It's yours to do with as you please," Amber said, tucking the signed documents into her portfolio. "Congratulations, Megan. You've built something extraordinary." "Thank you," I replied, checking my watch. "I've got to get to my shift." As I walked the 3 blocks to Rosie's diner, I felt lighter somehow. After 6 years of secrecy, everything was about to change. The properties, the investments, my entire carefully constructed financial life would finally be visible to everyone, especially my parents. The morning crowd at the diner was typical for a Friday, a mix of regulars and office workers grabbing breakfast before heading to their jobs. I moved between tables with practiced efficiency, pouring coffee and taking orders while my mind rehearsed Sunday's revelation. "You seem distracted today," observed Martin, a retired teacher who came in every morning for the same breakfast. 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, no hash browns. "Big weekend ahead," I admitted, refilling his coffee. "Good big or bad big?" he asked. I considered the question. "Transformative big." Martin nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Those are the best kind. Shake everything up, see what settles." By the time my shift ended at 3, I had 7 missed calls. 2 from my mother confirming Sunday's dinner plans, 3 from Amber, with updates about the closing, and 2 from the contractor handling the warehouse conversion project. I returned them all while walking toward the Overlook neighborhood, toward the mansion that would officially be mine tomorrow. I stopped at the bottom of the long driveway, looking up at the property that was about to become my home. The 1930s. Tudor-style mansion sat on the highest point of Overlook Boulevard, its stone facade and leaded windows projecting an understated elegance. 3 stories of architectural history surrounded by century-old oak trees and meticulous landscaping. For 6 years, I'd driven past this property on my way to inspect potential investments, always pausing to imagine what it would be like to call it mine. Now it wasn't just a dream. It was paperwork and bank transfers and keys that would be in my hands tomorrow. My phone rang again, Jenna with updates about Sunday's plan. As I answered and continued walking up the hill toward my future home, I allowed myself just a moment to imagine the look on my parents' faces when they realized exactly what their just-a-waitress daughter had been building all these years. Saturday. Morning arrived with a buzz of activity that belied the significance of what was happening. To anyone watching, it looked like a normal day. I arrived at Rosie's for my morning shift at 6 a.m., tied my apron with practiced ease, and began the familiar rhythm of brewing coffee and prepping the service station. But beneath the routine, everything was changing. "You're awfully cheerful for someone who just got evicted," Rosie commented as I hummed while refilling the sugar dispensers. Let's just say I've got a solid backup plan, I replied, not quite ready to reveal the full truth, even to her. Glad to hear it. Frank and I were worried about you. The breakfast rush kept us busy until 11, a constant stream of weekend regulars and families seeking pancakes and conversation. I moved through it all on autopilot, my mind constantly drifting to the meeting with Amber scheduled for noon, when I would receive the keys to the Overlook mansion. Taking off early today, I told Rosie as I cashed out my tips at 11:30. Got an appointment I can't miss. She eyed me curiously. Housing related? You could say that. I hung up my apron and grabbed my bag. See you tomorrow. Tomorrow's your day off, she reminded me. Right. Monday then. I changed in the diner's bathroom, swapping my work uniform for dark jeans and a crisp white button-down, the closest thing to professional attire in my daily wardrobe. The woman in the mirror looked ordinary, no outward sign that she was about to take possession of a multi-million-dollar property. Amber was waiting at the Overlook mansion when I arrived, her sleek BMW parked in the circular driveway. She looked every inch the successful real estate agent in her tailored suit and designer accessories, a sharp contrast to my casual outfit. There she is, Amber called as I walked up the stone path. Ready for the grand tour? The enormity of what I was doing hit me as we climbed the wide front steps. This wasn't just another investment property. This was a statement, to myself, to my parents, to everyone who'd ever dismissed me as just a waitress. The previous owners completed a full renovation 3 years ago, Amber explained as she unlocked the massive oak door. Updated electrical, plumbing, heating, everything meets modern code while preserving the historical details. The foyer opened into a soaring 2-story entrance hall with a sweeping staircase and original hardwood floors. Morning light streamed through leaded glass windows, casting patterns across the space. Empty of furniture, the house echoed with possibility. 5 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, library, formal dining room, chef's kitchen, and a finished lower level, Amber recited as we moved through the main floor, plus the carriage house that could serve as a guest cottage or office space. Each room was more impressive than the last, with architectural details that spoke to the home's heritage, coffered ceilings, built-in bookcases, window seats overlooking the meticulously landscaped 3-acre property. The kitchen was completely redesigned during the renovation, Amber said, leading me into a space that made my fingers itch to start cooking immediately. Commercial-grade appliances, marble countertops, and custom cabinetry created a chef's dream with a massive center island that could easily seat 6. It's perfect, I breathed, already imagining Sunday's dinner served here rather than in the formal dining room. More intimate, more impactful. We continued through the house, with Amber pointing out features and upgrades, while I mentally placed furniture and planned the strategic display of my portfolio materials for tomorrow's revelation. In the library, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves flanked a stone fireplace, creating a warm, inviting atmosphere despite the room's grandeur. This would be where I'd present the full scope of my investments to my parents, surrounded by built-in symbols of knowledge and accomplishment. The master suite occupies the entire east wing of the 2nd floor, Amber explained as we climbed the stairs. It includes a sitting area, 2 walk-in closets, and what I can only describe as a spa bathroom. She wasn't exaggerating. The master bathroom featured a freestanding soaking tub positioned beneath a bay window, a shower enclosure that could fit 4 people comfortably, and heated marble floors. The adjoining closets were each larger than my current bedroom. This is all mine? I asked, momentarily overwhelmed by the scale of what I'd purchased. Amber smiled, reaching into her portfolio to extract a thick envelope. It is now. Here are your keys, all security codes, operating manuals, and warranty information. Congratulations, Megan. You've officially closed on the property. I accepted the envelope with hands that trembled slightly. 6 years of careful investments, of calculated risks and determined saving, had led to this moment. "I've taken the liberty of having the utilities transferred to your name as of today," Amber continued. "And as requested, I've notified the security company that you'll be hosting a small event tomorrow evening." "Thank you," I said, "for everything." After Amber left, I wandered through my new home in solitude, allowing the reality to sink in. Each room represented not just square footage and property value, but vindication. Every detail, from the crystal doorknobs to the hand-carved newel posts on the staircase, was a rebuke to those who'd dismissed my choices. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. "Catering confirmed for 5 p.m. setup tomorrow. Furniture rentals arriving 9 a.m. Where are you?" I sent her my location, and 20 minutes later, her ancient Volkswagen pulled into the circular drive. Her expression as she stepped out of the car was everything I'd hoped for. Pure, unfiltered. Shock. Holy shit. She stood in the driveway, staring up at the mansion. "You actually did it. Come see the inside," I called from the front steps. Jenna followed me through the house in stunned silence, her event planner's eye clearly recalculating all the arrangements we'd discussed. "We're going to need more flowers," she finally said, when we reached the kitchen. "And I think we should set up dinner in here rather than the formal dining room." "Exactly what I was thinking," I agreed. "More impact." "Speaking of impact," she said, setting her bag on the massive island, "I've been coordinating with the rental company. The furniture will be mostly classic pieces, nothing too trendy. I want the focus to be on the property portfolios and financial documents we're displaying." She pulled out her iPad and began showing me the design boards she'd created, each room strategically staged to tell part of my financial story while maintaining the illusion that I'd been living there for some time. "The contractors will arrive at 8 to hang the artwork and set up the displays," she continued. "I've selected frames that match the home's aesthetic, so everything looks intentional rather than hastily assembled." As Jenna continued outlining the plan, I felt a momentary pang of guilt. The elaborate staging, the carefully orchestrated reveal. Was it unnecessarily theatrical? But then I remembered my father's dismissive tone on the phone, the years of condescension, the constant implication that my choices represented failure. "We need to talk about your outfit," Jenna said, interrupting my thoughts. "Please tell me you're not planning to wear your uniform." I laughed. "No, though the temptation is strong." "Good. I've pulled several options from your closet." She scrolled through photos on her phone. "I'm thinking the black dress with the subtle statement necklace. Professional but not trying too hard." "Perfect." I agreed, then glanced at my watch. "I need to meet with the contractor about the warehouse project in an hour. Want to come with me? You can see what's next in the portfolio." Jenna's eyes widened. "There's more after a literal mansion?" "The mansion is personal," I explained. "The warehouse conversion is the next investment." We spent the rest of the afternoon meeting with contractors and reviewing plans for the warehouse district project, then returned to our apartment to pack essential items I'd need before the moving company transferred everything else next week. As I folded clothes into a suitcase, the reality of tomorrow's dinner settled over me. In less than 24 hours, my parents would arrive at Caraway's restaurant expecting to find their waitress daughter ready to receive another lecture about wasted potential. Instead, they'd be redirected to an address in the city's most prestigious neighborhood, where their underachieving child would be waiting in a mansion filled with evidence of her secret success. "Are you nervous?" Jenna asked, helping me gather toiletries. I considered the question carefully. Not nervous. Ready. It's been 6 years of hiding who I really am, of listening to their disappointment. I'm ready for that to end. That night, I slept in my new home for the first time, on a mattress delivered hastily by the rental company since my own furniture wouldn't arrive until after the weekend. Lying in the massive master bedroom, surrounded by empty space and possibility, I felt a profound sense of arrival. Tomorrow, everything would change. The carefully maintained division between Megan the waitress and Megan the investor would collapse. My parents would finally see the full truth of what I'd built while they were busy lamenting my life choices. As I drifted off to sleep, I wondered which would shock them more, the mansion itself or the revelation that their daughter had been capable of so much more than serving pancakes all along. Sunday morning dawned with perfect clarity, not a cloud in the Portland sky, as if the weather itself approved of my plans. I woke early in my new master bedroom, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar space before remembering. Today was Revelation Day. The quiet of the mansion enveloped me as I padded downstairs in bare feet to make coffee. The kitchen, my kitchen, gleamed in the morning light, commercial-grade appliances waiting patiently for their first use. I ran my hand along the cool marble of the island, still struggling to fully accept that this was mine. All mine. Purchased. With money I'd earned while being dismissed as just a waitress. My phone chimed with a text from Jenna. "Furniture team arriving in 30. You decent?" I glanced down at my oversized t-shirt and sleep shorts. "Give me 10, I replied, heading back upstairs to shower. By 9 o'clock, the mansion had transformed from an empty shell into a carefully orchestrated stage set. Rental furniture, selected to suggest tasteful wealth without trying too hard, filled the main rooms. Strategically placed portfolios, architectural drawings, and framed property photographs adorned side tables and built-in bookshelves, each telling part of my financial story. "The dining setup will be here at 4, Jenna announced, consulting her tablet as we stood in the kitchen. "Caterers at 5, flowers at 3. The sommelier is bringing wine selections at 4:30. I told him price was no object since this is essentially your coming-out party. "Perfect," I agreed, watching as contractors hung a large framed aerial photograph of my warehouse district investment above the library fireplace. "What about the portfolios?" "Being printed now. My friend at the design firm is handling it personally. Leather-bound. Folios with your complete investment history, property-by-property breakdown, and current net worth statement. She'll deliver them by 2. I nodded, mentally reviewing our schedule. "And you've confirmed the change with Caraway's?" "Yes. When your parents arrive for their 7 o'clock reservation, the maitre d' will inform them that you've arranged for dinner at a different location. He'll provide them with this address and assure them that you're expecting them." The plan was meticulous, an elaborate reveal designed to forever change how my parents saw me. As contractors and rental teams moved efficiently through the house, I retreated to the library to finalize my presentation. The coffee table now held 3 leather portfolios, one for my parents and one for each of us. Inside each was the complete financial history of Megan Andrews, property acquisitions beginning with the first modest duplex, renovation budgets and completion photos, rental income statements, equity positions, and finally, the purchase agreement for the Overlook Mansion. By 3 o'clock, florists had filled the house with tasteful arrangements, highlighting the mansion's architectural features while adding warmth to rooms still awaiting personal touches. The rental furniture, a mix of classic and contemporary pieces, created the illusion that I'd been living here for months, not hours. "Your bedroom's ready," Jenna called from the staircase. "Come see what we've done." I followed her upstairs, to find my master suite transformed. The rental bed had been made up with luxury linens, bedside tables staged with books and a carafe of water, even framed personal photos showing me at various investment properties, carefully edited by Jenna's graphic designer friend to remove any trace of my waitress uniform. "It's perfect," I breathed, taking in the careful illusion we'd created. "They'll never suspect I just got the keys yesterday." "That's the idea," Jenna agreed, checking items off her tablet list. "Now we need to get you ready. Makeup artist? We'll be here at 5:30. "Makeup artist? Jenna, I can do my own makeup." She fixed me with a stern look. "This is your moment. We're doing it right." At 4, the dining setup arrived. A stunning mahogany table and 8 chairs for the kitchen, along with fine china, crystal, and silver that made my diner's white plates seem like toys in comparison. The caterers followed at 5, immediately, claiming the kitchen as their domain, prepping a 4-course meal designed to impress without seeming ostentatious. "Ms. Andrews, where would you like the wine service set up?" The sommelier, a poised woman named Claire whom Jenna had apparently known for years, appeared in the doorway with an assistant carrying cases of wine. "In the kitchen, I think," I replied. "We'll be dining there rather than in the formal dining room." Claire nodded approvingly. "More intimate. I've selected wines to complement each course, including a special champagne for when you formally reveal your situation." At 5:30, the makeup artist arrived, ushering me upstairs to prepare for my parents' arrival. As she worked, transforming my everyday appearance into something more polished, I found myself growing unexpectedly nervous. "You're tense," she observed, applying highlighter to my cheekbones. "Big date?" "Family dinner," I replied, "but an important one." By 6:45, everything was ready. The mansion gleamed with subtle lighting, portfolios waited on the library coffee table, dinner preparations filled the kitchen with mouth-watering aromas, and carefully selected background music played softly throughout the house. I stood in the grand foyer, dressed in the simple black dress Jenna had selected, hair and makeup professionally done, hands clasped to stop their slight trembling. 6 years of hiding my true financial life were about to end. 6 years of enduring lectures about wasted potential would culminate in tonight's revelation. "You look amazing," Jenna said, appearing beside me in a sleek outfit I recognized as her professional event coordinator ensemble. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified," I admitted. "Excited. Vindicated." "All appropriate," she assured me. "I just got word from the restaurant. Your parents have arrived at Caraway's and received the change of venue information. They should be here in about 15 minutes. I nodded, suddenly speechless. The enormity of what I was about to do, the dramatic unveiling of my secret life, felt momentarily overwhelming. "Have a glass of wine," Jenna suggested, reading my expression. "Claire opened something special for you." I followed her to the kitchen where Claire handed me a crystal glass of something pale gold and effervescent. "Liquid courage," she said with a knowing smile. "The good stuff." The wine was exquisite, notes of apple and toast with a mineral finish that spoke of old vines and careful production. I sipped slowly, letting the bubbles calm my nerves as the minutes ticked closer to my parents' arrival. At 7:10, the security system chimed, alerting us to a vehicle approaching the property. Jenna checked the camera feed on her tablet. "Black Mercedes sedan turning into the driveway," she confirmed. "Showtime." I moved to the front window, watching as my parents' car pulled into the circular drive, coming to a stop before the grand entrance. Even from a distance, I could see their confusion as they took in the mansion, clearly checking the address they'd been given against this unexpected destination. "Deep breath," Jenna whispered, squeezing my arm before retreating to the kitchen to coordinate with the staff. My father emerged from the driver's side first. Richard Andrews, investment banker, perpetually disappointed father. His silver hair caught the early evening light as he surveyed the property with visible confusion. My mother followed, elegant as always in a tailored dress that probably cost more than a month of my rent, or would have, before I purchased a mansion that made their suburban colonial look modest by comparison. I watched them approach the front steps, their confusion evident in every hesitant movement. My father checked his phone again, presumably confirming the address, while my mother smoothed her already perfect hair in a nervous gesture I recognized from childhood. The doorbell rang, its deep chime reverberating through the foyer. This was it. The moment I'd been planning for years. The reveal that would forever change how Richard and Diana Andrews viewed their underachieving daughter. I opened the door with practiced calm, enjoying the shock that registered immediately on both their faces. "Megan?" my mother managed, glancing between me and the mansion behind me. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Mom." "Dad." I stepped back, gesturing them inside. "Welcome to my home. Dinner's almost ready." They entered slowly, eyes darting around. The grand foyer, with its soaring ceiling and sweeping staircase. My father's expression shifted from confusion to suspicion. "Your home?" he repeated. "What do you mean, your home? Who lives here?" "I do," I replied simply. "Please come in. We have a lot to talk about." As I closed the door behind them, I caught a glimpse of Jenna near the kitchen, giving me a discreet thumbs up. Phase 1, shock, had been successfully achieved. Now for the revelation that would complete their education about exactly what their just a waitress daughter had been building all these years. My parents stood in the foyer, their expressions shifting between confusion and disbelief as they took in the soaring ceilings and elegant architectural details of the mansion. "I don't understand," my mother said, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "Is this some kind of model home? Are you working with a real estate company now?" "No," I replied calmly. "This is my personal residence. I closed on it yesterday." My father's eyes narrowed. "That's not possible. This property must be worth $2 million, I finished for him. "Actually, I got it for a very good price. The previous owners were motivated sellers." The silence that followed was profound. I could almost see the calculations happening. Behind my father's eyes, waitress salary, expensive Portland neighborhood, the impossibility of the equation. "Would you like a tour before dinner?" I offered, gesturing toward the main living areas. Without waiting for their answer, I began walking, knowing they would follow out of sheer bewilderment if nothing else. The home was built in 1932 for a lumber baron, I explained, leading them into the formal living room where strategic portfolios and property photographs were artfully displayed on side tables. 5 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, completely renovated 3 years ago with all systems, updated while preserving the historical details. My mother trailed her fingers along a marble fireplace surround. "Megan, how could you possibly afford this place? Did you inherit money we don't know about?" "In a manner of speaking," I replied. "Grandma left me $5,000. When she died, it became the seed money for my first investment." "Investment?" My father picked up one of the framed photographs, an aerial view of my first duplex property. "What investment?" "Perhaps we should move to the library," I suggested. "I've prepared a complete presentation." The library, with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and leather furniture, had been staged for maximum impact. The coffee table held the 3 leather portfolios, each embossed with my initials. Large framed photographs of my various properties lined the walls, and architectural drawings for the warehouse conversion project were prominently displayed on an easel. "Please sit." I gestured to the comfortable chairs arranged around the coffee table. My parents exchanged glances before slowly lowering themselves into the chairs, eyes never leaving my face. I remained standing, suddenly grateful for Jenna's insistence on the professional hair and makeup. It added a layer of authority I desperately needed in this moment. "For the past 6 years," I began, "while working as a waitress at Rosie's Diner, I've been building a real estate investment portfolio using my tips and rental income. What began with a single duplex has grown into 9 properties with 37 rental units, plus a major warehouse conversion project that breaks ground next month." I handed each of them a portfolio. "Everything is documented here: property acquisitions, renovation budgets, rental income, equity positions, and current market valuations." My father opened his folio with obvious skepticism that quickly transformed into stunned silence as he flipped through the meticulously prepared pages. My mother hadn't even opened hers yet, still staring at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking in tongues. "This isn't possible," my father finally said, looking up from a page detailing my current net worth. "No one builds this kind of portfolio. From waitress tips." "I did," I replied simply. Every dollar I earned at the diner that didn't go to basic living expenses went into my investment fund. I lived with roommates, drove a 15-year-old car, and wore secondhand clothes. Meanwhile, I listened to my customers, contractors, developers, city officials, discussing neighborhood changes and development plans. The diner wasn't just my job, it was my market research lab. But why? My mother finally found her voice. Why hide this from us? Why let us believe you were wasting your potential? The question hung in the air, heavy with years of disappointment and misunderstanding. I took a deep breath, carefully considering my answer. Because you decided what my potential should look like, I said finally. From the moment I chose not to go into investment banking or take a corporate job, you treated my decisions as failures rather than choices. You never asked why I wanted to wait tables. You just assumed it meant I was squandering my education. My father's face hardened. We invested in your business degree. And I used it, I interrupted, gesturing to the portfolio in his hands. Every single day. Market analysis, property valuation, renovation budgeting, negotiating with contractors and lenders. Everything I learned at State went into building this portfolio. I moved to the easel displaying the warehouse conversion plans. This is my next project, converting a historic warehouse district into mixed-use spaces, residential lofts, boutique, retail, and creative offices. The zoning change was just approved last week. My father stood abruptly, moving to examine the plans with the practiced eye of someone who had evaluated countless investment opportunities. How are you financing this? He asked, his tone shifting subtly from dismissive to professionally curious. I've formed an LLC with 4 investors, I explained. My equity comes from refinancing 2 of my fully renovated properties. We project an 18-month completion timeline with units pre-selling now. A knock at the library door interrupted us. Jenna appeared, perfectly professional in her event coordinator persona. Ms. Andrews, dinner will be served in 15 minutes. Would you and your guests care for drinks in the meantime? Thank you, Jenna. I think we would. I turned to my parents. Wine? Something stronger? Scotch, my father said immediately. Neat. White wine, my mother added, still looking dazed. As Jenna departed to arrange the drinks, my mother finally opened her portfolio, slowly turning pages filled with property photographs, financial statements, and growth projections. 6 years, she murmured. All this time, when we thought you were just serving pancakes. I was never just anything, Mom, I replied, the words carrying the weight of years of diminishment. That was your narrative, not mine. Jenna returned with our drinks served on a silver tray. My father took his scotch and moved to the window overlooking the property's manicured grounds, his back rigid with what I recognized as his processing posture, the stance he took when absorbing unexpected information. How many people know about this? He asked without turning. Until yesterday, just my real estate agent, attorney, and financial team, I replied. Now Jenna knows, since she helped arrange tonight. And you? Your sister doesn't know? My mother looked surprised. You two are so close. No one in the family knows, I confirmed. I wasn't ready to share until I had achieved certain benchmarks. Like buying a mansion, my father observed dryly, turning back to face us. Like building a portfolio that could withstand scrutiny, I corrected. I didn't want to hear about beginner's luck or reckless decisions. I wanted proven success. A moment of silence followed as my parents absorbed this. My mother took a large sip of her wine, then set the glass down with deliberate precision. Why now? She asked. Why reveal all this tonight? The question was fair. I moved to sit across from her, meeting her eyes directly. Because I'm tired of the narrative that I'm wasting my potential. Because you and Dad were coming to Portland. Specifically to lecture me about my life choices and set up yet another interview for a job I don't want. Because it's time for you to see me as I actually am, not as the disappointment you've invented. My mother flinched at the word disappointment, but didn't deny it. My father rejoined us, sitting beside her with his scotch cradled in both hands. "We only wanted what was best for you," he said, his standard defense when confronted with the impact of his expectations. "No," I countered gently. "You wanted what you thought was best for me. There's a difference." The tension in the room was palpable. Years of misunderstanding crystallized in this moment of truth. My father stared into his scotch as if it might contain a script for how to proceed, while my mother continued to flip through the portfolio, lingering on photographs of properties I'd transformed from neglected buildings to thriving investments. "This is impressive," my father finally admitted, the word clearly difficult for him to say. "Unorthodox approach, but the results speak for themselves." From Richard Andrews, this constituted high praise. I felt a small knot in my chest loosen slightly. "Dinner is served," Jenna announced from the doorway, providing a welcome interruption to the emotional standoff. I led my still-stunned parents to the kitchen, where the massive island had been transformed into an intimate dining space. The caterers had outdone themselves. The table settings gleamed under strategic lighting, fresh flowers added color and texture, and the aroma of expertly prepared food filled the air. "We'll be dining here rather than in the formal dining room," I explained as they took their seats. "I've always preferred kitchen dining. It's where I spend most of my time at the diner." "You're still planning to work at the diner?" My father couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice. "Even now?" His gesture encompassed the mansion, the implicit millions, the obvious fact that continued waitressing made no financial sense. "For now, yes," I replied as the first course was served. A delicate crab salad with citrus vinaigrette. "Rosie's isn't just a job to me. It's where I've built my most valuable network of contacts and gathered the market intelligence that informs my investments." Claire appeared with wine pairings for the first course, describing the selection with professional enthusiasm before retreating to leave us to our conversation. "You have a sommelier," my mother observed faintly, "and catering staff." "For tonight," I clarified. "Jenna arranged everything. I wanted your first visit to be special." The absurdity of the situation, me hosting my parents in a mansion with catered dining and wine service after 6 years of them pitying my waitress lifestyle, suddenly struck me as darkly funny. A smile tugged at my lips, then expanded into a genuine laugh that I couldn't suppress. "What's so amusing?" my father asked stiffly. "Everything," I admitted, gesturing between us. "This whole situation. For years you've been worrying about my future, lamenting my career choices, trying to rescue me from a life you deemed inadequate. And all along I've been building this—" I indicated the mansion around us, "while you were booking tables at Caraway's to lecture me about wasted potential." My mother's expression softened unexpectedly, and to my surprise she began to laugh too, a genuine, unrestrained sound I hadn't heard from her in years. "It is rather absurd," she agreed, dabbing at her eyes. "All those concerned conversations with our friends about you finding yourself?" "While I was finding investment properties instead," I finished. My father didn't laugh, but the rigid line of his shoulders relaxed slightly. "I still don't understand why you felt you needed to hide this from us," he said, taking a careful bite of the crab salad. "Don't you?" I asked quietly. My question hung in the air between us as the catering staff cleared our first course plates. The sound of fine china being carefully stacked provided a momentary reprieve from the tension. My father met my gaze, his expression a complex mixture of defensiveness and dawning realization. "You think we would have— what? Discouraged you?" he finally asked. "I know you would have," I replied without hesitation. "You would have called my first duplex purchase reckless, my renovation plans amateur, my financial projections unrealistic. You would have insisted I consult with your financial advisors, your real estate connections, your banking colleagues. This wouldn't have been my success. It would have become a Andrews family project with you at the helm." My mother winced slightly, recognition flashing across her face. The second course arrived. Perfectly seared scallops with a delicate spring. Pea puree, along with Claire's wine pairing explanation. When we were alone again, my father set down his fork with deliberate precision. We have expertise that could have helped you. Dad, you manage multi-million-dollar corporate portfolios. Your expertise wasn't relevant to buying a rundown duplex in an emerging neighborhood with $25,000 in cash. I needed to make mistakes, learn the local market, and build relationships with contractors who understood Portland-specific issues. But, Richard, my mother interrupted gently, she's right. Remember when she wanted to start that online shop in college? You completely took over, insisted on incorporating, brought in your tax attorney. I was trying to help, he protested. You were trying to control, I corrected. There's a difference. My father opened his mouth as if to argue, then closed it again, taking a long sip of wine instead. This small concession, this moment of self-awareness, felt like a seismic shift in our relationship. The waitressing, though, my mother said, returning to her recurring confusion. I still don't understand why you've continued waiting tables when you've clearly been successful in real estate. Several reasons, I explained, cutting into a perfectly seared scallop. First, Rosie's isn't just a diner, it's the junction. Point for contractors, developers, city planners, and neighborhood organizers who all talk freely around just a waitress. I've gotten more valuable market intelligence from overheard conversations at the diner than I could have from paid consultants. I took a sip of the wine Claire had paired with our course, a crisp Sancerre that complemented the scallops perfectly. Second, there's something grounding about the work. Every day at Rosie's reminds me that most people punch a clock, work, hard for their money, and deserve safe, well-maintained housing they can afford. But couldn't you have just told us that? My mother pressed. Instead of letting us worry about you for 6 years? Would you have listened? Really listened? I asked. Or would you have heard what you wanted to hear, that your daughter was confused, going through a phase, needed guidance back to the right path? My mother's silence was answer enough. She turned her attention to her scallops, avoiding my eyes. The Portland real estate market has been robust, my father said, changing the subject to more comfortable territory. Especially in the neighborhoods you've targeted. Your timing was fortunate. My timing was strategic, I corrected. I didn't randomly select properties based on availability. I tracked development patterns, zoning change proposals, transit expansions, and demographic shifts. That business degree didn't go to waste, Dad. A hint of pride flickered across his face before he could suppress it. The warehouse conversion, he said, gesturing toward the library where the plans were displayed. That's a significant step, up from residential properties. It is, I agreed. Mixed-use development is complex, but the projections are solid. We're already 30% pre-sold on the residential units, and we have letters of intent for 40% of the commercial spaces. We? My father's eyebrows raised slightly. You have partners? 4 of them, I confirmed. All local investors I met through the diner, a contractor who specializes in historic restorations, a retired architect with extensive commercial experience, and 2 siblings who run a property management company focused on creative spaces. The third course arrived, a perfectly prepared beef tenderloin with seasonal vegetables and a red wine reduction. Claire appeared with a robust Cabernet, explaining its provenance and tasting notes before again leaving us to our conversation. Your team seems quite professional, my mother observed, gesturing vaguely toward Jenna and the catering staff visible through the kitchen pass-through. Have you worked with them before? Jenna is my roommate, I explained. She works in event planning and offered to coordinate tonight. The catering team is from Elevation, one of the top companies in Portland. Your roommate, my father repeated slowly. You have a roommate, but you just bought a mansion. Until yesterday, yes. My apartment lease was canceled when the building was sold to developers. Rather than find another rental, I decided it was time to make this purchase. I've had my eye on this property for years. My father took a bite of the tenderloin, chewing thoughtfully. The Overlook neighborhood has appreciated significantly in the last decade. This property will likely continue to increase in value. This was as close to approval as he was likely to get, evaluating my home purchase as a sound investment rather than a personal choice. I accepted it for the olive branch it was. "Tell me about your first property," my mother said unexpectedly. "The duplex. How did you know it was a good investment?" The question surprised me, perhaps the first time she had expressed genuine interest in my choices rather than concern about them. I found myself telling the story of the rundown property I'd discovered through conversations with a regular customer at Rosie's, explaining how I'd lived in one unit while renovating the other, then used that rental income to improve my own side. "I did most of the cosmetic work myself," I explained. "Painting, tiling, refinishing floors. I only hired professionals for electrical, plumbing, and structural issues." "You installed tile?" My mother looked genuinely shocked. "Where did you learn to do that?" "YouTube tutorials mostly, and I made friends with the contractors who came into the diner. They gave me tips, sometimes helped me source materials, occasionally stopped by to check my work." "That seems risky," my father commented, though without his usual judgment. "Calculated risk," I corrected. "I researched everything thoroughly, had professionals verify any work that could impact safety or code compliance, and learned valuable skills that helped me evaluate contractor bids on later projects. As we finished the main course, I noticed my parents exchanging glances, a silent communication I recognized from childhood. My mother gave a slight nod, and my father cleared his throat. "Megan," he began, his tone more measured than I was accustomed to hearing. "What you've built is impressive. Unorthodox, but clearly successful. I think we owe you an apology for not recognizing that you were forging your own path, rather than rejecting education or ambition." The words hung between us, startling in their sincerity. My mother reached across the table, briefly touching my hand. "We were worried," she added softly. "All these years, thinking you were struggling, living paycheck to paycheck, not using your degree. We should have asked better questions instead of making assumptions." The dessert course arrived, a delicate chocolate soufflé with fresh berries, providing a momentary distraction from the emotional weight of their unexpected apology. Claire poured small glasses of Sauterne to accompany the dessert, her professional patter filling the silence as she described the wine's honeyed notes. When she had gone, I took a deep breath, considering my response carefully. The apology was meaningful, perhaps the first time my parents had acknowledged that their vision for my life wasn't the only valid path. And yet, 6 years of dismissal and judgment couldn't be erased with a single moment of recognition. "Thank you," I said finally. "I appreciate that. But I need you to understand something important. I didn't do all this to prove you wrong or to eventually reveal some dramatic success story. I did it because it was the right path for me, regardless of whether you ever recognized its value." My father nodded slowly, absorbing this with uncharacteristic thoughtfulness. "Fair enough," he said after a moment. "Though I have to ask, was tonight's reveal necessary? The mansion, the portfolios, the catered dinner? It seems rather theatrical." A small smile tugged at my lips. "Perhaps. But after 6 years of being dismissed as just a waitress, I wanted you to see the complete picture all at once. Would you have truly believed me if I'd simply told you over dinner at Caraway's that I owned 9 properties and was worth over $4 million? Probably not," my mother admitted with surprising candor. "It would have seemed fantastical." "Exactly. Sometimes people need to see concrete evidence before they can adjust their perceptions." We finished our dessert in a more comfortable silence. the tension that had dominated our earlier conversation gradually giving way to thoughtful reflection. As the catering staff cleared the final plates, Jenna appeared in the doorway. "Coffee in the library?" she suggested. "Perfect," I agreed, leading my parents back to the book-lined room where our evening had begun. The portfolios still lay open on the coffee table, physical evidence of the truth they were still processing. My mother settled onto one of the leather couches, her eyes drawn to a framed photograph of me standing before my third property acquisition, a small fourplex I'd purchased after leveraging equity from the duplex. "You look so confident in this picture," she observed. "I don't think I've ever seen that expression on your face before." "That was a pivotal moment," I explained, sitting beside her. The fourplex was my first major step up, 4 units instead of 2, a significantly larger renovation budget, and my first property where I didn't live on site during the work. My father remained standing, examining the architectural drawings for the warehouse conversion with renewed interest. "These plans are quite ambitious," he commented. "Mixed-use development is complicated, zoning requirements, commercial codes, accessibility compliance." "I have good partners," I reminded him. "And I've spent 6 years building relationships with local officials, contractors, and property managers who understand Portland's specific challenges." He nodded, a hint of professional respect in his expression that I'd never seen directed at me before. "I'd be interested in hearing more about your financing structure for this project," he said carefully. "Not to interfere," he added quickly. "Just professional curiosity." This was new territory for us, my father approaching my work with colleague-level interest rather than parental supervision. I found myself cautiously optimistic about this shift. "I'd be happy to walk you through it tomorrow," I offered. "The full projections are in my office." "You have an office here?" my mother asked. "The carriage house has been converted into a home office," I explained. "Though I haven't moved my files over from the apartment yet. That happens next week." My father's phone chimed with an incoming message. He checked it quickly, then looked up with a slight frown. "That's Jeremy Wilson. He's wondering if we're still on for your meeting tomorrow morning." The investment banking interview they'd arranged, the latest in a long series of rescue attempts for their waitress daughter. In the emotional intensity of our dinner, I'd almost forgotten about it. "You can tell him I won't be able to make it," I said firmly. "I have a meeting with my warehouse development partners at 9, and then I need to work my shift at Rosie's." "You're still going to wait tables tomorrow?" My mother couldn't hide her incredulity. "After all this?" I gestured around us at the mansion, the evidence of my financial success. "This doesn't change who I am or what works for me," I explained. "The diner is still valuable for market intelligence, and I made commitments to Rosie and the team." "But surely now that we know," my father began. "That's just it," I interrupted gently. "This isn't about you knowing. It's about me living my life according to my values and plans, not according to what looks appropriate to others." The statement hung between us, not confrontational, but firmly establishing a boundary that had been missing in our relationship for years. After a moment, my father nodded, typing a response to Jeremy Wilson that I couldn't see. When he looked up again, something had shifted in his expression. A new awareness, perhaps, that his daughter wasn't simply defying his expectations, but had constructed an entirely different framework for success. "I think," he said slowly, "that we have a lot to learn about who you've become." It wasn't quite an acceptance of my choices, but it was an acknowledgement of their legitimacy, a small but significant victory in the long-running battle over what constituted a successful life. "I'd like that," I replied, meaning it despite the caution that 6 years of judgment had instilled in me. "There's a lot I haven't shared yet." I woke early Monday morning, my body still accustomed to the pre-dawn rhythm of diner shifts despite the luxurious surroundings of my new bedroom. For a moment, I lay still, watching sunlight filter through windows far larger than any apartment I'd ever rented. contemplating the seismic shift in my family dynamics that had occurred over dinner the night before. My parents had left around 10, their departure marked by an awkward moment at the front door, none of us quite sure how to navigate this new terrain between us. My mother had hugged me with unusual fierceness, whispering, "I'm proud of you," in a voice thick with emotion. My father had settled for a formal handshake that softened into a brief, stiff embrace at the last moment. "We'll talk more tomorrow," he'd said, an implicit acceptance that our relationship required continued conversation rather than a neat resolution. They'd returned to their hotel downtown rather than stay in any of my 5 guest bedrooms. A small relief, as I wasn't quite ready for that level of immediacy after years of careful distance. Now, as I prepared for my day, I found myself unexpectedly nervous about seeing them again. Last night's revelation had been carefully orchestrated, every detail designed to establish my success in terms they could understand and respect. Today would be more unstructured, more authentic, and therefore more challenging. I dressed in my standard Monday attire, black pants and a crisp white button-down that would transition from my morning meeting to my diner shift. The juxtaposition felt surreal, meeting with development partners about a multi-million-dollar project, then tying on an apron to serve pancakes and coffee for 8 hours. "You're up early," Jenna observed, appearing in the doorway of my bedroom. She'd stayed overnight in one of the guest rooms, both of us too exhausted after the caterers departed to drive back to our apartment. "How are you feeling about last night?" "Still processing," I admitted, applying minimal makeup in the bathroom. Mirror. I think they were genuinely shocked, which was the goal, but where we go from here? I shrugged. That's uncharted territory. "At least they can't call you just a waitress anymore," she pointed out, leaning against the doorframe. Your dad's face when he saw the property portfolio was absolutely priceless. I smiled at the memory. True, though I'm not sure he's fully convinced this wasn't all some elaborate fluke. "Then show him your home office today," Jenna suggested. "Let him see the systems and processes behind your success. That's the language he'll understand." She had a point. My father respected methodical approaches, clear strategies, disciplined execution, all elements that had driven my real estate business behind the scenes while I poured coffee at Rosie's. "They want to meet for breakfast before my partner's meeting," I said, checking my watch. "I should get going." "Want me to come with you?" Jenna offered. "Moral support?" I considered it briefly, then shook my head. "I think this is something I need to handle on my own, but thank you for everything. Last night wouldn't have happened without you." "That's what roommates are for," she quipped, helping stage elaborate financial reveals to shock judgmental parents. We both laughed, the tension of the morning breaking momentarily. I arrived at Westfield's, an upscale downtown breakfast spot, 15 minutes early, a habit ingrained from years of diner shifts where tardiness wasn't tolerated. My parents were already there, my father checking email on his phone while my mother studied the menu with unnecessary intensity. "Megan," my mother said warmly as I approached, standing to embrace me. The gesture felt more natural than last night's awkward goodbye, as if she'd spent the intervening hours recalibrating her perception of our relationship. My father set down his phone, offering a nod that served as both greeting and acknowledgement. "We ordered coffee," he said, gesturing to the empty cup at my place setting. "Thank you." I settled into my chair, noticing subtle changes in both my parents' demeanor. My mother's usual carefully maintained poise had softened slightly, while my father seemed more observant, studying me with new attention. "We've been talking," my mother began after the waiter had poured my coffee and taken our breakfast orders, "about last night, about everything you revealed. It's a lot to process." "I know," I acknowledged. "I had 6 years to build this reality. You've had less than 24 hours to adjust to it." "Why Portland?" my father asked suddenly. "Of all the real estate markets you could have chosen, why here? It's 3,000 miles from home." The question surprised me. Not the professional curiosity about market selection, but the personal subtext. Why had I moved so far away from them? Several factors, I replied, slipping into the analytical framework he would appreciate. Strong population growth, geographic constraints limiting sprawl, diverse economy not dependent on a single industry, and favorable zoning policies for the kind of projects I wanted to pursue. I paused, then added the personal dimension he'd indirectly requested. And enough distance to establish myself independently without falling into family patterns. My father nodded slowly, accepting both answers. Your warehouse project, he said, changing directions. I reviewed the prospectus in the portfolio last night. The return projections seem optimistic given current interest rates. Just like that. We were on safer ground, discussing business rather than emotions, evaluating investment strategies rather than personal choices. I explained our financing structure, the pre-sale commitments that mitigated risk, and the tax incentives available for historic restoration projects. You've thought this through, he conceded as our breakfast arrived. Eggs Benedict for him, a vegetable frittata for my mother, simple eggs and toast for me. Though I still question the decision to remain so heavily invested in a single market. Geographic. Concentration allows me to leverage local knowledge and relationships, I countered. I know this market intimately, which neighborhoods are transitioning, which blocks are targeted for infrastructure improvements, which zoning committees are open to variance requests. All information gathered while waiting tables. My mother observed, a note of wonder in her voice as she finally began to understand the method behind what she'd perceived as madness. Exactly. Rosie's isn't just a diner. It's where city planners get coffee before meetings, where contractors discuss upcoming projects, where neighborhood association members hold informal gatherings. For 6 years, I've had access to market intelligence that most investors pay consultants to compile. My father took a bite of his Benedict, considering this. Unconventional approach, he finally said, but clearly effective. Coming from him, this constituted high praise. We finished breakfast with conversation that felt almost normal, discussing interest rate trends, housing market projections, and potential recession indicators with the shared vocabulary of business. Education. My mother largely observed, occasionally asking clarifying questions that revealed her own financial acumen, often overlooked in my father's shadow. As we waited for the check, my father cleared his throat, a gesture I recognized as preceding an important statement. Your mother and I have been discussing your warehouse project, he said carefully. It's ambitious, particularly the historic preservation elements. We'd like to tour the site if you're amenable. The request surprised me, not just professional interest, but active engagement with my work. My partner's meeting is there at 9, I replied. You're welcome to join us, though I need to leave for my shift at Rosie's by 11. You're still planning to work your shift? My mother couldn't hide her confusion. Even after revealing everything to us? Yes, I said simply. My reasons for working at Rosie's haven't changed. My father studied me for a moment, then nodded. We'll join you for the partners meeting, then drive you to your shift. Perhaps we could observe a bit of your market research approach in action. The suggestion was so unexpected that I nearly laughed. Richard Andrews, investment banker to corporate America, wanted to sit in a diner booth and watch his daughter serve pancakes to contractors and city officials. If you'd like, I agreed, trying to keep the surprise from my voice. Though I can't promise any groundbreaking market intelligence on a Monday morning. Nevertheless, he replied, I find I'm curious about this other life you've been leading. The warehouse district meeting went better than I could have anticipated. My partners, Elena and Marco Sullivan, the siblings who ran a property management company, Jack Norton, the historic restoration specialist, and Deirdre Chen, the retired architect, were initially bemused by my parents' presence, but quickly engaged with my father's incisive questions about financing structures and return projections. Your daughter has an exceptional eye for potential, Deirdre told my father as we toured the cavernous space that would soon be transformed into luxury lofts and boutique retail. When most investors were focused on the East Side neighborhoods, Megan was already mapping this district's possibilities. My father nodded, running his hand along the exposed brick wall that would become a focal point in the residential units. The historical elements add value and distinction, he observed. Smart to preserve rather than demolish. That was Megan's insistence, Jack added. Most developers would have leveraged the land value and started fresh. She argued that the historical character would command premium pricing that offset the additional renovation costs. I watched my father absorb this information, recalibrating his understanding of my business acumen with each new detail he learned. My mother, meanwhile, was deep in conversation with Elena about community integration strategies, another dimension of the project that seemed to surprise and impress her. By the time we finished the tour, it was nearly 11. I checked my watch, aware that I needed to be at Rosie's by 11:30 for my shift. We should get going, I reminded my parents. I can't be late. My father checked his own watch, a habit we apparently shared, and nodded. We'll drive you. The ride to Rosie's was quieter than our breakfast conversation, each of us processing the morning's revelations in our own way. As we approached the diner, its vintage neon sign glowing against the cloudy Portland sky, I felt a strange nervousness at the collision of my two worlds, the waitress and the investor, finally visible in the same space. So this is Rosie's, my mother said as we parked across the street. The diner was hardly impressive from the outside, a classic 1950s structure with chrome details and large windows, well-maintained but decidedly modest compared to the financial district buildings, where my father conducted business. This is it, I confirmed. Command Central for the past 6 years. We entered together, the familiar bell above the door announcing our arrival. The lunch rush was just beginning, with about half the booths occupied and all the counter seats filled. Rosie herself was at the grill, her silver hair tucked under a bandana as always, while Tanya managed the register. Megan! Rosie called when she spotted me. You're early, and you brought guests. My parents, I explained, leading them to an empty booth near the back. They're visiting from Boston. Rosie wiped her hands on her apron and came around the counter, extending a flour-dusted hand to my surprised parents. Richard and Diana Andrews, she said warmly. I've heard so much about you over the years. Welcome to my little establishment. You have a lovely place, my mother replied automatically, years of social training kicking in despite her obvious surprise at Rosie's informal greeting. Been in this location since 1978, Rosie said proudly. Megan here is one of my best. Customers love her, and she never misses a shift. My father nodded, clearly unsure how to engage with this enthusiastic woman who knew his daughter in ways he didn't. We've heard good things about your establishment as well, he managed. Sit, Rosie insisted, ushering them into the booth. First meal's on the house for Megan's family. She can take your order once she's changed. I excused myself to the back room where staff kept their belongings, changing quickly into my uniform and tying my apron with practiced movements. When I returned to the dining area, my parents were studying the laminated menus with the careful attention of anthropologists observing an unfamiliar cultural artifact. Ready to order? I asked, pulling the order pad from my apron pocket and clicking my pen. My mother looked up, startled by the transformation from daughter to server. Oh, yes. I'll have the garden salad with grilled chicken, dressing on the side. House specialty is the Rosie's Reuben, I suggested. Hand-cured corned beef, homemade sauerkraut. It's what we're known for. I'll stick with the salad, she replied with a small smile. Dad? My father studied the menu a moment longer. The Reuben, he decided. And coffee, black. I nodded, jotting down their orders with the shorthand notation I'd developed over years of waitressing. "Coming right up. Feel free to observe the other patrons," I added with a hint of wry humor. "You might overhear some valuable market intelligence." As I moved away to place their order and attend to other customers, I caught my father scanning the diner with new interest, no longer seeing just a modest restaurant, but the unconventional business intelligence hub I'd described. The lunch rush intensified, leaving little time for conversation with my parents as I moved efficiently between tables, taking orders, delivering food, and refilling coffee cups. Yet I was acutely aware of them watching me, not with their usual disappointment, but with growing curiosity and perhaps a newfound respect. Around 1:30, as the rush began to ease, the bell above the door announced new customers, Mike Reynolds, and two of his contracting crew, regulars who usually came for breakfast but occasionally stopped in for late lunch. "Meg," Mike called as they settled at the counter. "Got that coffee ready. We've been dealing with permit issues all morning." "Coming right up," I assured him, grabbing the pot and heading their way. As I poured, I noticed my father watching the interaction with sudden interest. "How's the West Side project going?" I asked casually, setting up cups for all three men. "Nightmare," Mike sighed. "City changed the setback requirements after we'd already finalized plans. Now we're redrawing everything, which pushes us into rainy season for foundation work." "That's rough," I sympathized. "Which zone did they reclassify?" "The entire riverfront corridor," Mike replied, showing no surprise at my knowledge of zoning categories. "New environmental impact guidelines from the state level. Affects everything west of Morrison." I nodded thoughtfully, mentally adjusting my evaluation of two potential properties I'd been researching in that area. "Good to know. The usual for lunch?" "You bet." "And Meg," Mike leaned closer. "That warehouse project you mentioned last month? My buddy Jim is on the Historical Commission. He says they're fast-tracking applications in that district to meet year-end tax credit deadlines. Might be worth looking into." "I appreciate the tip," I said sincerely, jotting their food order and moving back toward the kitchen. As I passed my parents' booth, I noticed my father's expression, a mixture of surprise and dawning comprehension as he witnessed firsthand the value of my diner connections. By the time I returned with their food, my parents had finished their meals. My mother dabbed her lips with a paper napkin, regarding me with new eyes. "We should let you work," she said, rising from the booth. "Thank you for showing us your world today." "Will I see you before you leave town?" I asked, suddenly concerned this might be our last interaction of their visit. "We've extended our stay through Wednesday," my father replied, an unexpected adjustment to their typically rigid scheduling. "Perhaps you could show us your other properties tomorrow, and we'd like to see your home office set up." The request represented a significant shift, professional curiosity about my business operations rather than personal judgment about my career choices. "I'd like that," I said sincerely. "I finish here at 7. We could have dinner at the house afterward." "Perfect," my mother agreed. "And Megan, thank you for being patient with us while we adjust our understanding." It wasn't quite an apology for years of dismissal, but it was an acknowledgement of their limited perspective. Perhaps the most self-awareness they had ever demonstrated in our relationship. As they left the diner, I watched through the window. As they paused on the sidewalk, engaged in intense conversation while gesturing back toward Rosie's. Something fundamental had shifted between us, though the full implications remained to be seen. "So those are the famous parents," Rosie observed, appearing beside me with a fresh pot of coffee. "Not what I expected." "How so?" I asked curiously. "The way you've described them over the years, I imagined fire-breathing dragons," she chuckled. "They seem human, confused maybe, a little out of their element, but watching you like they're seeing you for the first time." "They are," I replied softly. "They really are." The Tuesday morning light streamed through the stained glass accents of my bedroom windows, casting jewel-toned patterns across the hardwood floors. After 6 years of studio apartments and shared housing, waking up in the master suite of my mansion still felt surreal, like I'd wandered onto a movie set rather than my actual life. I stretched, contemplating the day ahead. My parents had asked to see my other properties, a request that would have seemed impossible just days ago. My phone buzzed with a text from Amber. County approved the zoning variance for the warehouse project. Full steam ahead! Excellent news that would add significant value to our development plan. I made a mental note to share this with my father, whose interest in my business operations had shifted from skeptical to genuinely curious. After a quick shower, I dressed in what I thought of as my investor clothes, tailored black pants, a silk blouse, and low heels that looked professional but allowed for walking through construction sites. A far cry from my waitress uniform, but still distinctly my style, rather than the corporate armor my parents had always envisioned for me. Downstairs, I found Jenna at the kitchen island, laptop open and coffee mug in hand. "Moving company called," she informed me. "They'll deliver your furniture on Thursday. Meanwhile, I've drafted a press release about the warehouse zoning approval for your review." In addition to event planning, Jenna handled public relations for my development projects, another layer of our relationship my parents had yet to discover. "Perfect timing," I replied, pouring myself coffee. "My parents are coming by later to tour the properties and see my operations set up. I think my father might actually be impressed by the zoning variance news." "Miracles never cease," Jenna quipped. "So they're staying longer than planned?" I nodded. "Through tomorrow, at least. I think they're still processing everything." "Processing that they're just a waitress daughter out-earns her investment banker father?" Jenna suggested with a sly smile. "We don't know that for sure," I cautioned, though financial industry standards suggested it might be true. "But they're definitely recalibrating their understanding of success." My parents arrived precisely at 10, my father driving a rental car that seemed unnecessarily large for their extended stay. Old habits of status signaling died hard, apparently. My mother emerged wearing casual slacks and a sweater rather than her usual tailored dresses, a small concession to the day's activities. "Good morning," I greeted them, leading them through the mansion's side entrance that connected directly to the carriage house. "I thought we'd start with my office, then visit the properties in chronological order, watching the progression of my investment strategy." The carriage house had been transformed during the mansion's previous renovation into a sophisticated home office. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided natural light, while the original exposed beams added character to the thoroughly modern workspace. 3 large monitors dominated a custom desk, with neatly organized file cabinets and a conference table completing the professional setup. "This is comprehensive," my father observed, taking in the digital mapping system displayed on one monitor, a color-coded visualization of Portland neighborhoods with my properties, potential acquisitions, and development indicators clearly marked. "I run everything from here," I explained, demonstrating the property management software on another screen. "Tenant communications, maintenance requests, rent collection, contractor scheduling, all integrated with financial projections and market analysis." My mother wandered to a wall covered with framed photographs, each of my properties documented before, during, and after renovation. "These transformations are remarkable," she said softly. "I had no idea you could do this kind of work." Most of the design concepts were mine, I acknowledged. Though I worked with architects and contractors on implementation, each property has its own identity while maintaining certain signature elements that have become my brand in the Portland market. My father had moved to examine a shelving unit containing dozens of carefully labeled binders. "Your documentation system?" "Complete records for each property," I confirmed. "Acquisition documents, renovation budgets, contractor agreements, tenant histories, maintenance logs, and appreciation tracking." He pulled one binder labeled Duplex I, Foundational Strategy, and began paging through it with professional interest. "This is exceptionally well organized," he admitted, examining my handwritten notes in the margins of a renovation budget from 6 years earlier. "I learned from watching you," I said truthfully. "Your emphasis on meticulous record-keeping and data-driven decision-making, I just applied it to a different market segment than you expected." Something flickered across his face. Recognition, perhaps, of how his influence had shaped me, even as I forged a path he hadn't anticipated. He returned the binder carefully to its place, a small gesture of respect for my systems. "You mentioned touring the properties," my mother prompted. "Yes," I agreed, gathering my tablet and keys. "We'll start with the duplex and work our way up to the warehouse project. It tells the story better that way." The tour became a journey through my evolution as an investor. At the modest duplex where everything began, I showed them the renovations I'd completed largely by myself, pointing out tile work I'd learned from YouTube tutorials and cabinet refinishing techniques taught to me by diner regulars. "You lived here while renovating?" my mother asked, looking around the compact living space with new eyes. "In the smaller unit," I confirmed. "I rented out the larger one to generate income that funded the renovations on my side. Once both units were completed, I leveraged the improved property value to acquire the fourplex." At each successive property, the scope and sophistication of my renovations became more apparent. The fourplex showcased my first major structural changes. The 8-unit building demonstrated my growing understanding of market-specific amenities. The 12-unit property revealed my developing brand aesthetic that commanded premium rental rates. My father asked increasingly technical questions about financing strategies, appreciation calculations, and tax considerations, professional inquiries that acknowledged my expertise rather than questioned my judgment. My mother, meanwhile, noticed design elements and community integration features that spoke to values beyond mere profit maximization. "You've installed community gardens at several properties," she observed as we toured a courtyard space between apartment buildings. "That's not standard practice for investment properties. It builds community among tenants, reduces turnover, and creates sustainable property value not solely dependent on market fluctuations," I explained. "Also, it's the right thing to do. Housing isn't just about shelter, it's about creating environments where people can thrive." By the time we reached the warehouse district, my parents had fallen into a rhythm of engaged questions and thoughtful observations that felt nothing like their previous dismissal of my choices. The cavernous space, with its soaring ceilings and massive windows, provided a fitting finale to the progression they'd witnessed. "This is the future of urban development," I explained, walking them through areas marked with tape on the concrete floors indicating future luxury lofts, retail spaces, and community areas. Mixed-use projects that preserve historical architecture while meeting contemporary needs for integrated living and working environments. "The scale is impressive," my father acknowledged, "as is your vision for the space. The pre-sale commitments you've secured at this stage demonstrate significant market confidence." "The zoning variance was approved this morning," I informed him, watching his eyes register the professional significance of this development milestone. "We can proceed with the full adaptive reuse plan rather than the more limited alternative. That substantially increases your profit margin," he observed, the calculation evident in his expression. "By approximately 22%, I confirmed, while also preserving more of the historical elements, which enhances both the property's intrinsic value and its contribution to the neighborhood's character." As we concluded the tour, standing in what would eventually become the central atrium of the converted warehouse, my father turned to me with an expression I'd rarely seen, directed my way, professional respect. "You've built something remarkable, Megan," he said quietly. "Not just a portfolio of properties, but a coherent investment philosophy that balances financial returns with community impact." "That means a lot," I replied, surprisingly moved by his acknowledgement. "I've been thinking," he continued, his tone shifting to one I recognized from business discussions. The warehouse project might benefit from expanded capital access to accelerate the timeline. If you're open to it, I have some investors who might be interested in a limited partnership opportunity. The offer hung between us, not a takeover or correction of my approach, but a genuine collaboration between equals. 6 years ago, I would have rejected any involvement from my father outright, protecting my independence. Now, secure in my accomplishments and identity, I could consider the proposal on its merits. I'd be interested in discussing possibilities, I replied carefully, provided it doesn't dilute the project's core vision or my partner's interests. He nodded, accepting my boundaries without argument, another significant shift in our dynamic. Of course, it would be a minority investment only, supporting your established direction. Later that evening, as we shared dinner around the kitchen island of my mansion, takeout containers from my favorite local restaurant scattered between us in casual disarray, the conversation flowed with unprecedented ease. My mother asked about my plans for the mansion's interior design, while my father discussed market trends affecting urban property values. "Will you continue waiting tables?" my mother finally asked, the question that had clearly been on her mind throughout our day of property tours. I considered my answer carefully. For now, yes, though perhaps with a reduced schedule. Rosie's still provides valuable market intelligence and community connections that benefit my investment strategy. And honestly, I enjoy the work, the rhythms of service, the relationships with regulars, the groundedness it provides. My father nodded slowly, accepting this explanation with newfound understanding rather than dismissal. Unconventional information. Gathering, but demonstrably effective. "Your approach reminds me of something," my mother said unexpectedly. "Before I met your father, before I became the investment banker's wife with the perfect suburban home, I worked as a retail buyer for a department store. My best market research came from sitting in the store cafe, watching how customers browsed and what they carried in shopping bags from other stores. This revelation surprised me. My mother rarely discussed her pre-marriage career, and I'd never known this detail about her professional past. "You never told me that," I said softly. She smiled ruefully. Somewhere along the way, it seemed less important than maintaining the image of the perfect corporate wife and mother. But watching you these past few days has reminded me of that younger self who understood the value of direct observation. The parallel between us hung in the air, a bridge across decades of misunderstanding. Perhaps my mother recognized more of herself in my choices than either of us had realized. As they prepared to leave that evening, my father hesitated at the door, clearly formulating a thought that didn't come easily to him. "I owe you an apology, Megan," he finally said. "For years, I've measured your choices against a narrow definition of success that failed to recognize the innovation and determination in your approach. I was wrong to dismiss your path simply because it didn't resemble my own." The words landed with surprising weight, perhaps the first time Richard Andrews had ever acknowledged a fundamental error in judgment, particularly regarding his children's lives. "Thank you," I replied simply, not trusting myself with more elaborate response to this unexpected admission. "We're having dinner with Jeremy Wilson tomorrow night," he continued. "I'd like to tell him about your development projects if you're comfortable with that. He has connections in sustainable urban planning that might be valuable for your warehouse vision." The request marked another shift. My father wanting to showcase my accomplishments rather than correct my choices, to connect me with resources that might support my vision rather than redirect it. "I'd appreciate that," I agreed, "though I'm working at Rosie's until 7. "We'll make it a late dinner," he said without hesitation, accommodating my schedule for perhaps the first time in our relationship. After they departed, I found myself standing in the grand foyer of my mansion, surrounded by evidence of everything I'd built while they believed I was just a waitress. The revelation had changed our relationship in ways I was still processing. Not a complete reconciliation, but a fundamental recalibration of mutual respect and understanding. My phone chimed with a text from Jenna. "How did it go?" "Better than I expected," I replied. "I think they're finally seeing me." The next morning, as I prepared for my shift at Rosie's, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From recent college graduate defiantly choosing a diner job against my parents' wishes, to multi-millionaire property developer still, finding value in that same diner's connections and rhythms. The diner was quiet when I arrived. Just a few regulars at the counter and Rosie at the grill as always. "Your folks seemed nice," she commented as I tied my apron. "Different than I expected from your stories, but nice." "They're evolving," I replied with a small smile. "Turns out people can surprise you if given enough reason to reconsider their assumptions." "Speaking of surprises," Rosie said, lowering her voice, "I've been meaning to talk to you about something important." She gestured for me to follow her into the small office behind the kitchen, closing the door for privacy. "Frank and I are thinking about retiring," she said without preamble. 45 years of flipping burgers is enough for anyone. We've had offers for the business, but none that would preserve what makes this place special." I nodded, sensing where this conversation was heading but letting her continue. "You understand this place, Megan, not just as a business, but as a community hub. And that real estate brain of yours probably already recognizes the development potential of this location." She was right. The diner sat at a prime intersection that had appreciated significantly in recent years. The property included not just the restaurant but also the adjacent parking lot, nearly an acre of increasingly valuable urban land. "Are you offering to sell me the diner?" I asked directly. "I'm offering you first right of refusal," Rosie clarified, "because I trust you to honor what we've built while having the vision to evolve it for the future." The opportunity crystallized instantly in my mind, not just preserving the diner as a valuable information hub, but incorporating it into a mixed-use development that could become the crown jewel of my growing portfolio. A project that would honor Rosie's legacy while creating something new and community-centered. "I'd like to make you a serious offer," I said, already calculating financing options and development potential. "Not just for the business, but for a vision that would build upon everything you've created here." Rosie smiled, the lines around her eyes crinkling with genuine pleasure. "I thought you might say that. Let's talk numbers after your shift." That evening, as I joined my parents and Jeremy Wilson for dinner at one of Portland's finest restaurants, I carried Rosie's proposal with me like a treasured secret, the next chapter in my investment journey already taking shape. Jeremy turned out to be far more interesting than the corporate drone I'd imagined, with genuine expertise in sustainable urban development and thoughtful questions about my warehouse project. My father, true to his word, presented my accomplishments with unmistakable pride, while my mother added insights about the community-building elements she'd observed during our property tour. "You've developed quite a distinctive approach," Jeremy observed, "preserving neighborhood character while enhancing functionality and value. That's the holy grail in urban redevelopment." "It's about balance," I explained. "Financial returns matter, but so does creating spaces where communities can thrive." As the conversation flowed, I realized how completely the dynamics had shifted. No longer was I the disappointing daughter who had rejected the conventional path to success. Instead, I was a respected professional with a unique vision and demonstrated results, someone whose choices deserved consideration rather than correction. When my father proposed a toast to innovative approaches and the courage to pursue them, I recognized it for what it was. Not just acknowledgement of my success, but acceptance of my right to define that success on my own terms. The next morning, I stood on the front steps of my mansion, saying goodbye to my parents before they returned to Boston. The 4-day visit had transformed our relationship in ways none of us could have anticipated when they arrived for what they'd thought would be an intervention dinner with their waitress daughter. "We're proud of you, Megan," my mother said, embracing me with genuine warmth. "Not because of the mansion or the properties, but because you had the courage to forge your own path and the discipline to make it successful." "We didn't see it," my father acknowledged, his typical reserve softened by newfound respect. "We were looking for success that resembled our own definition and missed the extraordinary business you were building right in front of us." "Thank you," I replied, touched by their recognition. It means a lot to hear that. As their car pulled away from the circular drive, I felt a sense of completion, not of my journey as an investor, which continued to evolve with exciting new possibilities, but of a chapter in my relationship with my parents that had been marked by misunderstanding and judgment. The waitress they had dismissed had revealed herself as a visionary developer with a multi-million-dollar portfolio. The mansion they now viewed with pride had become not just my home, but a symbol of success achieved on my own terms, through my own methods. 2 weeks later, I signed the purchase agreement for Rosie's diner and the surrounding property, the beginning of my most meaningful project yet. Rosie and Frank would stay on through the transition, helping me preserve the diner's special character while planning a phased development that would transform the adjacent parking lot into a community-centered mixed-use project. The announcement was met with excitement from regular customers, particularly when they learned that the diner's essence would be preserved rather than erased by corporate standardization. Mike Reynolds and his contracting crew immediately began offering suggestions for the development, while city planners who frequented the counter expressed interest in the project's community integration aspects. As I hung the framed purchase agreement on the wall of my home office, next to photographs of my first duplex and architectural drawings of the warehouse conversion, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From college graduate defying expectations to waitress secretly building an empire to property developer embracing both identities without apology. The labels others had applied, just a waitress, wasting her potential, throwing away her education, had never defined me. Instead, they had fueled my determination to succeed on my own terms, to build something meaningful while disregarding conventional measures of achievement. My parents now understood what I had known all along, that success isn't defined by job, titles, or social expectations, but by the courage to follow your own vision and the discipline to bring it to reality. That sometimes the person serving your coffee might be building an empire between refills. That just a waitress might be the most limiting and inaccurate label imaginable for someone with the determination to defy expectations and create their own definition of success. If you've enjoyed this story of defying expectations and building success on your own terms, make sure you're subscribed to my channel. I share new inspirational stories every week about people who took unconventional paths to extraordinary success. Hit that subscribe button right now, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Next week, I'll be sharing the incredible journey of someone who went from homeless to owning a tech company valued at over $50 million. All because they refused to give up on their vision. You won't want to miss it.